All right, so Jake, tell me who you are. What's your name? What do you do?
Well, my name is Jacob Rayford, and I am the family ministry as well as social media ministry pastor at Fresno First, and been doing that now for going on a year. Yeah, but more importantly, man, I just have a passion for people, and so you'll find me loving on people, talking to people, trying to spread the good news of Jesus, pretty much everywhere and anywhere I am.
So, where are you from?
From Merced. Wasn't born there. Actually born in Hanford. My parents moved me to Merced real early. Pretty much lived there my whole life. And actually just moved to Fresno in July. Yeah.
So, we've become good friends over the last, couple months now.
Yeah.
I met you through a mutual friend through doing website for Fresno First.
Yeah.
And so, and then just we kind of hit it off and
Yeah.
have a real kindred spirit. And I've been wanting to do these videos. Just I'm calling them Word on the Street.
Okay.
And basically, the idea is to just talk to different community leaders, talking about issues from a Christ-centered perspective.
Okay.
And literally, we were just texting each other today, and this was not really a planned thing.
No.
I just said, hey, you wanted to get together, do a video.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, let's do it. What do you want to do it about?
Yeah.
I have no idea, but there's a few things that have been rattling around in my mind, and whether it's from sharing the gospel or contextualization or church structure, but this thing that's been on my heart, just on my mind, and I haven't really spoken out about anything is just because I'm still learning right now.
Sure.
And this issue is it's so loud in the culture right now.
Sure.
It's racial justice, racism, social justice. Does it exist? If it does, is it systematic? What does that look like?
Sure.
And then also, obviously, we're coming from a Christ-centered perspective. So, like, what is the church's response? And so, I mean, like, I don't even, I guess the first question is, like, because what's your ethnicity, your ethnic background?
I'm African American as well as Caucasian. So I'm both. My mom is white as white gets, and my dad is like Wesley Snipes black. But he pays his taxes. So, I totally get the both worlds of that. So, shoot away, man.
How was that growing up? Did you feel any of that, or because there was such diversity in the home, was that like not a thing for you?
Sure. There was diversity in the home, but there wasn't diversity in where I mentioned growing up. Like I was raised in Hanford, and that's another farming town, very Portuguese-based town, and I can remember being the only black person in the classroom. I can remember even in Merced, very few African Americans and in my sphere of influence that are black, and now in ministry, unless I go to a gospel or Southern Baptist church, there's going to be very few African American leaders even now in ministry. So in that aspect, I've always felt like the minority in terms of color, but.
Did you feel that in regards to like how you were treated growing up, or like did you experience any kind of racism or anything like that growing up?
I think the way I was raised removed me from getting caught into the cultural kind of thoughts that happen. So if you're black, you think black. If you're white, you think white. You dress white. You act black. All those different things. I was really removed from that because I was always taught. My dad is also a pastor that. Love is what covers the multitude of divisions. And so being loving towards people and accepting people for who they are, I didn't really get a chance to see color growing up because there wasn't color in my home, being that both my mom and dad were of different races.
Okay. So in the home it was good, and then you felt there was a difference just because nobody really looked like you in your setting.
Sure.
But it doesn't sound like you felt a lot of like kind of like oppression or anything like that, or
no. In fact, I think really for me, I ended up being everybody's favorite black guy. Everybody needs a black friend just so that they can say they're not racist. And I guess I had to be everybody's token black guy. I really felt in my ability confident to relate to both white people and black people because my dad would tell me the things he had to go through growing up in Avenel. The things he had to go through racism, and what my mom had to witness being a girlfriend of a black guy and white.
So tell me about that.
Sure. So my dad was heavily teased. Was often told you can't use this bathroom, you got to go use that one. Being the only black guy on the football team, some of those things would happen to him where he would be teased and called the N-word and stuff like that. And my
That's
mom...
in Avenel?
And Avenel, yeah. And I'd imagine that the town has evolved since the 60s and 70s. And I actually did experience some of that while I would travel away to, like, when I was playing football, there was a town called Sonora and another town called Oakdale. And both of those teams were heavily known for being racial kind of towns. And I remember one time playing a football game, being the only black guy on the team. We're in Oakdale. And while we were playing the football game, I can't say who did it, but we'd only assume that it was somebody from Oakdale actually spray painted our bus with the word nigger on it. But I'm the only one on the team. So that's probably the most direct racism I think I've ever experienced. I hung out with a lot of white people, Caucasian people growing up, but I didn't look like them, so I always felt like an outsider. But here's the interesting thing is when I would hang out with black people, I always felt like the outsider.
Why is that?
I think because my mindset wasn't that I was being treated different than anybody else. My mindset wasn't that I was socially behind or oppressed, I guess if you would say. I always was taught that we all have the opportunity to be who God's made us to be. And so since we're tying this into the Christ-centeredness, I was raised with that Christ-centeredness that God had love for everyone. But I could see how if you didn't have that type of upbringing and your parents are showing you different ways of how there is injustice, you could fall trapped to that. And I just didn't have the experience of becoming trapped by that mindset.
So with the way I'm seeing social media and just media in general,
Sure.
we're seeing it kind of propounded. It's all in your face.
Yeah.
Right? And so I was raised with the understanding that, racism is a thing of the past, didn't exist anymore. And then the older I got, the more experiences I had, not personally, but
Sure.
through just seeing. And then also now with media, it seems like, I don't know if it's a resurgence, if it's coming back, or if it's something that was underlying always there, or if it's something that the media is maybe blowing out of proportion that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on now that we're seeing it so much with like Black Lives Matter and those types of things? What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are thoughts. I think growing up in the position of kind of understanding where both feel they're at loss, I can see where both feel like now they have something to protect. And I think that's really what we're seeing. I think we're seeing an uprising of cultural differences now trying to protect the differences. And so much of the people in the middle want both sides to feel equal, whereas both sides have never felt that way. So if we were to talk about Black lives, a lot of them feel like even though it's been okay for us to use the same restrooms, go to the same schools, there's been privilege that's been underlining that's allowed white people to succeed more than black people. On the other side, you have Caucasians who feel like black people are now entitled because there was a slavery and an oppression, and now black people feel that, or the Caucasian people feel like now they owe something to this generation of African Americans when the current generation of Caucasians had nothing to do with the slavery. And so both sides feel like, hey, we've done nothing wrong. But the part that I believe is wrong is that neither side is willing to listen. Neither side is willing to understand perspective. Neither side is willing to understand testimony or where they're coming from. And as a result, it's turned to hate. Personally, in today's day and world, I've not experienced any racism. Why? Because I choose to love. I've never had any white person walk up to me and discriminate me. Have I been discriminated and maybe I turned the other cheek and didn't act towards it? Probably. But I think, in my opinion, I wouldn't say that racism is coming back. I think it's being defended in a different level.
So talk about that. So it's not coming back; it's being defended.
Sure.
At another level. So what do you mean by that?
I think what I mean by that is you've never owned anybody in terms of a person, and I say you, being that you're a lighter complexion of me.
Right.
Okay. You've never owned property. You've never gone to a slave trade and purchased somebody and put them to work, but you own a business.
Right.
Right? You have employees. You sign their paychecks. Biblically speaking, you're their master and they're your slave. But there's a specific way, biblically speaking, that you've been told to treat them. And there's a specific way that they've been told to treat you. Okay? That's contextual.
Right.
Okay? Modern world doesn't like to hear the word slave or master because it ties to the old days.
Right, right.
I'm okay being a slave. I have to provide a living. I'm currently a slave because somebody is my boss and signs my paychecks.
Right, right.
So that's the humility that needs to be involved with today's culture that's not willing to be there. On the outskirts of that kind of relationship from employee to employer, we no longer have the type of society where you can own me and my life and my family, and I have to change my last name to yours because I have to report to you, right? It's different. The type of racism that I believe today that's being defended is privileged racism, in the sense that maybe you would hear like propaganda talk a lot about this, that systematically speaking, and I think that was one of your questions that you maybe had on the horizon, was that black people feel like white people get opportunities that black people wouldn't. Okay, whether it's promotions, whether it's getting the job. If you and I were to go apply for the same job, we had the same education, same degree, same resume. They took a look at my skin, they take a look at your skin, they're going to go with yours because it's a little lighter. Why? Because you come from a different culture that's more common as opposed to my culture. I don't necessarily believe it to be true, only because I've never experienced that. So I can only speak from what's happened to me.
Right.
I've been very successful with job opportunities and things that I've ran up against Caucasian peoples and things that I want to accomplish and do. And the color of my skin's never been an issue. I think it becomes an issue when I want it to be.
Right. And I think that that's part of the conversation is because we have, I don't know if they're extremes or they're just different expressions of the emotion, because it's an emotional subject.
Yeah.
From the black side saying this is how we're feeling, and then on the white side, I think they feel maybe well, I'm not racist, so you're automatically assuming that I'm like that, and so it's not a defense of white people in general. It's like I'm defending myself, but that's coming out, and I think that goes back to like nobody's listening to one another.
Yeah.
I'll just say I posted one time on Facebook because I saw this it was a billboard, and it was talking about equal pay for women, and it was talking about women's rights and stuff like that. And I thought that was interesting because again, sexism. I wasn't raised as a sexist or to think that sexism was a thing. I thought there was a thing of the past.
Yeah.
So I just posted a question on Facebook, and I said, okay, all my female entrepreneur friends out there, or not even entrepreneurs, just female business owners, or professionals. So whether they own a business or not, professionals. Do you feel that you have been discriminated against because of your gender, not getting the same pay or the same opportunities? And I thought for sure it was going to be one side, yes, or the other, right? So like it was going to be majority one or the other. I had a ton of activity on that post.
I bet.
And it was like even. It was like 50-50.
Sure.
Like, yes, absolutely, I've experienced, and then they go to their own personal experience of what they went through, and then no, I've done the same kind of story that you've had. And so that some of them were in the same industries, some of them were doing the same type of work. I didn't know if it was a cultural thing, like for the employer maybe, or for the business, or I don't know what it was, but it's like, man, I didn't have an answer, but it goes back to the point that everybody has a unique perspective.
Absolutely.
And to say that sexism doesn't exist, it would be for me to negate everything that those other girls were feeling.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like it's the same thing. So you have a particular perspective.
Absolutely.
And you had a great upbringing. You had a particular place that you lived, and you've moved, and you've had different spheres of influences that you've been around, and it's been, for the most part, positive.
Yeah.
Yet I've talked to my other friends who... people of color who maybe grew up in a different side of town or different context, and they have a completely different story.
I bet.
And so the question is, like, where do we go? Like, how do we have that communication? How do we, like, where do we go from here? And then keeping, like, what is the Christian response to this issue that's in society?
Sure. That's a very complex question. I think it's kind of multifolded. But, scripturally speaking, it says that, and I wish that I could come up with the scripture and the book and the everything, but I think it's in Proverbs that says that love covers a multitude of sins. I think everything that we're talking about is sin. And the term of oppression and treating somebody differently than you would treat yourself. I mean, if we can go back to the Old Testament and just think about the commandments, and it's love your neighbor as thyself sort of thing, If you were to love me the way that you would want to be loved, you would not treat me different. You wouldn't look at my echo social status. You wouldn't look at my background. You wouldn't even look at my skin. You actually would see me and you and say, I'm going to treat that guy with love because I love myself. I think where we're at today is we're in a world that's a lot less forgiving than it ever has been. And if we were to begin to start understanding black people to the white people and forgive that race for what's happened in our past, today's generation would have nothing to hold against today's white people. If white people were to forgive us, and I say us because I'm still black, whether I've experienced this or not, if white people were to forgive us black people, for how we've had to respond to some of the injustice that's happening, there'd be less defensiveness in the white people. And once forgiveness can begin to happen, then we can unite, because it's only through that we begin to see eye to eye. For me to forgive you and you to forgive me means that you've taken a chance to listen to where I've come from, and I've taken a chance to listen to where you come from, and as a result, we can see and understand each other. Thus, forgiveness happens. So we live in a day and in a society where forgiveness is not something that's given, it's earned. And not one of the other societies wants to earn anything from the other. They want to prove everything to the other. And so that's, I think, the shift. If we can stop trying to prove ourselves and earn ourselves, lose the pride and practice humility, we can come to a place where we both understand each other. Because you're spot on. Nothing that's happening today is from this generation. It's all in reflection from the past. And so here we are, living in a world that was nothing like it was before, but responding as if it is. What changes that? Forgiveness. Humility. Understanding that black people have a part in this too. That if we want change, we need to change. In sense of, if we want people to treat us different than we've always been treated, maybe there's a specific way we're acting that needs to be different as well. And I could say the same thing for Caucasians.
Yeah.
You know, so
and that's the I think that's the topic for the next video of what is the, okay, let's identify these things.
Sure.
And then what should the response be?
Yeah.
And then maybe we could talk about again, not on this one, but
yeah,
it's just
absolutely.
it's in my mind, the taking the knee and like
Yeah.
that whole thing, and then the protesting and stuff like that. So yeah, I think this was good, man. This is beneficial. Everybody has a unique perspective.
Absolutely.
And then now the question is, okay, how do we respond? It starts with forgiveness.
Yeah.
It starts with humility.
Yeah.
And then actually listening to one another, having that conversation.
Absolutely.
And so hopefully this video will do just that. It'll spark the conversation with people.
I hope so, man. That's my prayer.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.